Hello, Stephanie Apple here. I'm going to show you some more gel printing techniques using my 8x10 gel press. I am going to make some greeting cards for Mother's Day, and I'm just breaking it out of its protective shell. I use baby wipes to clean it off in between each use so it's nice and clean, and I'm ready to get started. The reason I chose the 8x10 is because I am going to use stencils that are similar to that size. I know I've mentioned this before, but I can't say enough about gloves in the bottle. They really help keep the paint from sticking to your hands. When you're done, you can just wash the acrylic paint right off and you're ready to go. I'm also going to use mixed media paper today. I like it for detailed stencils such as this beautiful one from Joggles. This is from Elizabeth St. Hilaire's collection, and it's called Nouveau. And I'll be using it for the first time today for you. I love that great detail, and I'm excited to try it out. So I have some Charvin paints that I got from Jerry's, and I also have Liquitex white and some iridescent pearl, which is one of my favorites. There's something wrong here. That is not the color shown on the outside of the tube. Thinking maybe there's a misprint. I'm not sure, but that's okay because I was planning on using some white and pearl anyway to mix it up, and that will lighten up the color nicely for me. So just putting a couple of drops out, and then my brayer is ready to spread it around. And I do a little bit of swirling. That helps get rid of the dots. If you don't do this, you will probably have circular paint dots from where you put the paint down on the gel press when you lift the color, which is fine, especially if you're doing layers, but may not be the exact look you're going for. So trying to smooth it out. I love that cloudy look with the darker and lighter blue over there to the left. So I'll use my press tool from Speedball to help me smooth out the paper, and printmakers use this a lot as well, but it's very handy to make sure that you're picking up all of the paint. And for the big reveal, almost ready. Ta-da! So since I'm going to be making those Mother's Day cards, I'm going to print several backgrounds at once before I start layering on the stencils. I know that I want to make a batch of about 12 greeting cards, so that means I need to make at least 6 backgrounds. So I'll have that mixed media paper already torn out of the paper, out of the book, off to the side so I can grab it easily. And then I just continue to roll out and use a similar color palette for each of the backgrounds, and I'll stack up a handful of these pages. Acrylic paint dries very fast, so I don't worry too much about having my drying rack handy at first, because I'm just going to make these backgrounds, and by the time I'm done making all 6 backgrounds, they'll be dry enough that I can start layering if I don't use too much paint. You can see the approximate amount of paint that I use. Now that I've made my backgrounds, it's time to pick out some different colors for my layers. And I decided to keep the colors in the cool family, blues, purple, green, just to keep a nice theme and to keep the colors from getting muddy. I wanted this to be a beautiful background that kind of has a spring feel to it. So on my first print, I'm going to put some of that paint down. First, I'll start with the blue and purple and mix that up a little bit. It's a different shade of blue than what I had on the original background. On this print, I was a little bit more intentional about mixing my colors, so I was cool to mix the purple and blue together, but then I cleaned my brayer off just a little bit before I mixed in the green so that the green would stand out in that corner and not get too muddy. Now it's time to break out my stencil and lay it down right on the paint. And this is where using mixed media paper comes in handy. It's a little bit thinner than Bristol or watercolor paper. It's going to allow me to really get my fingers in between the grooves of the stencil so that I can pick up all of that paint in between each of the lines and get great detail. Then with that same print, I can take another piece of paper and make another print. This is exciting. You'll see it's a little bit different, but still has that same feel. Ta-da! 2 prints with only a little bit of effort. This time I decided to completely separate the purple, the blue, and the green and just make yet a different look. So I'm cleaning off the brayer in between each color. There's still going to be some mixture that happens because I'm not washing the brayer off, but at least it kind of makes a different effect. Now I have my prints ready to go. I've trimmed off the edges and I'm going to decide what size greeting cards I want to make. Ultimately, I love the color combinations here. There's good detail, but it's still kind of subtle. So I decided to go with a 5x7 greeting card because I have some white 5x7 cardstock all ready to go. And I also had these white rectangles already cut out from a die cut. Today I'm going to show you some awesome layering stamps by Altenew. Sometimes I stay away from layering stamps because I get nervous about having to make the layers perfect. But I thought, why not just go for it? Jellyfish aren't perfect. And I found as I went along that it was pretty easy to line these up. So I'm excited to show that to you today. So we're going to do the first layer, and it's pretty intuitive, to be honest. So there's no need to overthink it. And I picked a distressed oxide lighter color ink for the background because the other layers are going to go on top of it. So I knew I needed something pretty opaque, but also something that was lighter that I could put darker colors on top of. Using the most incredible stamping tool, the Misty, I'm able to put that magnet down and hold my paper still so that I can print twice if I want more color to be laid down on the image. And then it's time for layer number 2. So I've picked a darker color, and instead of using the distressed oxide ink, I'm just going with the distress ink because I thought that the color and the darkness would lay down nice on top of the distress oxide ink. So again, you got to use that magnet. I lined up the second layer as best as I could and putting that ink down on the stamp. And here we go. Turned out great. You can really see that detail. Time for round 3. Again, I'm not overthinking the layers, just trying to line them up. And I'm going to pick a third color. Wasn't sure if I should go darker blue or if maybe I should try to incorporate some green. But ultimately, I thought, you know, the bright blue would be nice. So I added that for my third layer. Nice part about the distress inks is when you layer them on top of each other, you will get yet another look. So that is helpful when you're using the layering stamps. And finally, layer number 4 takes me a little extra time to line up because they're touching, so I want to get it right. I thought these were good for Mother's Day because you've got kind of your larger jellyfish and your smaller jellyfish. I don't know that jellyfish are actually maternal, but hey, it has a nice sentiment. And there's my cat Lucky coming to say hello and help me craft today. So as soon as he moves his tail, we will continue. Okay, so layer 4 ready to go down. Can't wait to see it. Went with the darkest ink here to give it a nice outline. And it's not quite dark enough, so again, my magnet's holding that piece of paper still, so I can do another layer, which is great. Awesome. All right, I love how these turned out. There's tons of great detail on there. I don't know that I lined them up perfectly, but I think they look great, and you can kind of get a view of how they are. So I'm doing all 12 of those together, and part of batching is that you do things in steps. So now that I've made all 12 of my images, it's time for me to figure out how I want to assemble my cards. And I didn't think it was enough, just the image and the background, so I found these great Deli papers that I had printed on during previous gel press sessions. And they're great because I used the Deli paper for my brayer. You saw that off to the side in the video earlier. I also used the Deli paper to pick up extra ink on the stencil, or extra paint that is. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm just cutting it, I'm eyeballing it to kind of guesstimate what size I'd like to have underneath the jellyfish design. It is not exact. I'm not measuring really, just trying to hold it up, see what looks good. And I love that each person that gets a greeting card from me will get different art on their greeting card. There's some uniformity, but for the most part, everybody's getting something a little bit unique, which is fun, right? So when you're sending greeting cards to family and friends and they see the one you sent them and the one that you sent someone else, it's kind of neat for them to know that they have their own unique card from me. So I take my time here, and honestly, this one was probably the most fun of the whole process, was going through my stash of Deli paper that already had some paint on it and seeing what I liked and what I didn't like, and just trying to see what was visually appealing. And that's part of the process, and I encourage you to enjoy that. Now that I have decided the prints that I'm going to put behind the jellyfish, it's time to adhere the backgrounds to the white 5x7 backgrounds, greeting cards. And I'm using my Tombow Xtreme adhesive. That is my absolute favorite go-to because it's really strong. And this paper, while it's not as thick as watercolor or Bristol, it is still pretty thick, especially now that it has layers of acrylic on it. So you want to make sure it sticks. And of course I had to get a refill, but that's the wonderful thing about that Tombow Xtreme. Now for the other layer, using the Deli paper, I was worried about using the Tombow Xtreme because it's almost too strong and I thought it would rip the paper. So I brought out my Advanced Tape Glider by Scotch. I have a love-hate relationship with this tool, but, and you can kind of see that there. But it was honestly not working either. While it's not quite as strong as the Tombow adhesive, it's still way too strong to go directly onto the Deli paper. So what I found was don't mess with that because that'll give me a headache. So I went ahead and got this first one down, but then for my next one, I got smart and I decided to put the tape directly on to the first background, the mixed media paper. So again, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm holding the Deli paper kind of where I think I want it. And I'm putting some tape down on the background, the mixed media paper. And this, I'm fine with the fact that the edges are going to peel up. They're going to lift a little bit, and I think that just adds to the texture. They're not going to rip. It's gonna look nice and make it feel kind of flowy. And then here I've got all of my jellyfish prints down with some double-sided adhesive tape, and that's probably my least favorite part of the whole process, so I like to get it all done at once. I flip them all over, cut it all, and get it done. And then it's really satisfying to put it all together, put all of the layers together and see how the colors turned out and really take a look at that final product. Say hello. Well, I'm really pleased with how these turned out and that there's some uniqueness to them so that each family member will get something different. I hope that you enjoy and that you are not afraid to try your layering stamps. They are not so bad and turned out to add some nice complexity to the design. And also try to find a creative use for your scraps, your deli pages that you use, that you keep in a scrap drawer. Break them out and see if you can add some extra layers when you're making greeting cards. If you enjoyed today, please subscribe and head over to my blog at Apple+Made.com. And one last goodbye from Lucky. Bye, everyone.